Hello, everyone. We're now streaming this meeting about keeping kosher. I think it's our sixth lesson today, and we're going to be continuing with our article. And we are now on page 319. Okay. Can I just have some the water? Yeah. Thank you. So on page 319, we're going to continue with talking about parve foods. If you forgot what we talked about 3 weeks ago, we talked about dairy food and meat food, and we talked about the prohibition of eating meat and dairy together, where that comes from. And we also said that there's a category of meats, of food in the world, in this world, that is neither meat nor dairy. Okay, and they could be, and that food is called parve, which basically means it could be eaten with both kinds of foods. So let's read about what parve food is and what that concept comes from. So some foods, neither meat nor dairy in origin, are known as parve, popularly pronounced parve, okay, or parev, a term clearly taken from the Yiddish, but of uncertain etymological origin. Vegetables and fruits in their natural state, for example, are parve, even if they're cooked, unless they're cooked with meat or with milk, they are parve. Eggs are parve. Very interesting. Eggs that are derivative of chicken, which is meat, okay? The eggs are parve. Milk is not parve, right? Milk is dairy. Eggs are parve. That's an interesting concept, right? And that probably comes from the concept that we talked about last time. I think you're still here. That chicken is considered parve by some rabbis that we don't follow anymore. In the Galilee, we said the Rabbi Yossi had Galilee.
But did you say that's Spartak too?
No. No one looks at chicken as parve today. No one. Everyone perceives chicken as meat, so the conservative movement as well does not accept it anymore. It's like it's considered as meat, even in the conservative movement. So, hi, Bonnie. There's chocolate from Israel. And so that's why eggs are considered parve. Fish is also parve. Now, that's also interesting. Why would fish be parve? Fish is an animal, right? Not an animal. How do you? It's like a living.
That is an animal.
Shark is an animal.
Yeah, right. I guess it's not a mammal, but it's an animal.
A porpoise? No, it's not a mammal.
What?
A porpoise is a mammal.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Whales, porpoises.
So
Sharks.
fish is still a parve. So that goes back to the definition of what we talked about before, that in the Bible it says, you shall not eat the calf with its mother's milk. Okay, so they say that only animals that grow at home are like considered from the Bible, considered by the Bible as prohibited. And the others, like chicken and things like that, are considered as from the rabbis prohibited, okay? And the fish, or the eggs for that matter, are considered parve because they don't have that any prohibition at all, okay? So that's like what we talked about last time, that we said that there are different levels of our of how we're commanded. Remember, we said that there's like the Orayitic commandments, the Torah commandments. There are the Rabbanan commandments from the rabbis, okay, and then there are things that are completely permitted. There are these three parts to it, and we said that the Toraitic, the biblical commandments are the most severe and cannot be changed. The rabbinic ones have more flexibility in that regard. Okay.
Have there been changes in interpretation for kashrut after rabbinic, whether it's a Shulchan Aruch or other, the evolution within the Jewish community? Has any of that changed as far as kashrut is concerned?
Things have always changed, but it depends on when, from what period to what. Okay. So, for example, like even chicken with milk was a practice of very few rabbis in the Talmud. We only have evidence of one. Okay. But he probably had followers that probably followed him. But during the time of the Talmud, that practice stopped. And today, no one sees that as a valid option anymore. So there are changes in that. Usually with kashrut, it always becomes more and more stringent. That's what happens, with keeping kosher. I continue. Fish is parv. Many other food products are parv, but there are also many kinds of margarine and milk substitutes which blur the lines between what appears to be dairy and what can and cannot be eaten with meat. So therefore, it is important to remember that government standards for what they call non-dairy differ from country to country and almost always fail to conform precisely to the rabbinic definition of food stuffs. Therefore, many products such as certain coffee whiteners or imitation cheeses may be labeled non-dairy under US law because they may innocuous for the lactose intolerant, but are still considered dairy foods within the system of kashrut because an ingredient is strictly speaking a dairy product. Okay, so this is very important for us, right? We have sometimes a cup of coffee, and we have even in our synagogue we have a meal, and then we make sure to go and buy non-dairy creamer. That is a problem. If it doesn't have a kosher symbol that says that it's parv, it might very well be that it has dairy products in it.
What does the symbol look like?
We'll talk about that in a second.
I'm confused, as I've known Orthodox people who have non-dairy creamers, and I don't know that I've ever seen a K or a U on the things.
But they do. If you see, even here at our synagogue, we bring these non-dairy creamers. We just make sure that they are kosher. If they are kosher, they would say parv or dairy on it. Okay.
I've seen it on spray on like whipped cream, the little U. Is it a little U?
Yeah, OU.
With the D sometimes.
It's a U with a circle around it.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
It's an
Union of
OU.
Orthodox.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not just a U. Okay. So similarly, there are many meat substitute products available today, but not all of these are parv either. And some artificial meat may actually be considered dairy from the vantage point of kashrut, nor does a label referring to products as vegetarian constitute reliable assurance that the product is parv. Okay, I bought once a dairy substitute, okay, and I actually served it. I'm sorry, no, I don't mean a dairy, I mean a meat substitute.
Oh,
You know,
impossible meat.
impossible meat, yeah, and I made like spaghetti bolognese for people who are vegan, and I made a mistake. There were eggs in it. Okay, I didn't see that, or there were like milk additives to it. But I was like under the conception
Yeah,
that it's, you know,
it's vegan.
it's vegan, yeah.
Right.
And it had an OU, and it was even kosher.
Well, then,
So I was like, oh, that's wonderful, okay. But it had eggs in it, so eggs are kosher and everything is kosher. But and maybe at a different instance it was with the milk additives, but basically it wasn't suitable for vegans.
wow.
Yeah,
I heard
you have to
some,
be very careful with these things.
I heard somewhere about swordfish is kosher some part-time of the year and not other times of the year.
Um, there's a big dispute in the conservative and Orthodox movement because the Orthodox don't consider the swordfish as kosher, and there's some conservative rabbis that consider swordfish as kosher, and that is because the shells, shells, right? Of the
Scales.
the scales of the fish grow when it's young, and then as it leaves them, like the scales leave.
Sure.
Hmm?
When they
They
mature.
should,
Yeah.
just shed them.
They shed them, yeah. So that's why people say, it's not kosher anymore, but the other authorities say, no, it is kosher because that's how they grew, that's how they initially came to the world. So there's an ability to eat the swordfish if you go by that.
Rabbi, I mean, some of this, I guess I have a real problem with. It seems to me the rabbis have enjoined us that you should do everything that you are permitted to do. And yet, this is at times it's trying to make things more stricter than I think is really necessary. To me, that's a conflict there.
What is?
Just the idea that you're making kashrut stricter than it really has to be or has been from the Torah.
Makes it much harder for somebody who wants to do it. It almost gets them to the part where they just sort of throw up their hands. Is nothing
Right.
good enough?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I mean, it is challenging in many ways. This guide is trying to simplify things and make it, easier on people. And trying to also explain the concepts, because if we understand the concepts, maybe we understand more what's behind it and why to keep it. Once you start keeping a kosher home, it's like it's not that difficult. I mean, even for me here, living in a place where there's no kosher restaurants or there's no kosher supermarkets, okay, it's possible to do it. Now, if I would be in a different country where they would not have all the kosher products that they have here, it might have been more difficult. I know in Europe, there's some places that they don't have the kosher symbol on anything, and they really have a hard time. Like in a very small communities, nothing says kosher on it. So you don't know. In America, there's a big awareness to that. So that makes it much, much easier to keep kosher. But in any event, I think that what I do agree with what you're saying is like we need to go down to the basics of what is necessary and what's not necessary. Now, I do want to say that we don't follow the rabbinic, we don't follow the biblical law. The biblical law is not what we follow. Okay, and I've stressed it a few times. Again and again, our Judaism is not based on the Bible. Okay, it's like if you learn something from the rabbi's class, it's like the Bible. I didn't say the Bible is not Jewish. Okay, I didn't go as far as saying that. Although I could probably back that up as well. Okay, the Bible is not Jewish. The Bible is of the people of Israel. Okay, Judaism it comes later. Okay, but Judaism is based on the Bible and on the way the rabbis interpret the Bible. Our Judaism is based on the rabbis. Okay, the rabbis of the Talmud and the Mishnah, and we don't know exactly when that started, but we know for sure that after the destruction of the temple, being part of that group is really what kept the Jewish people going all along. So that's the same also with the laws of keeping kosher. The Bible has no laws of keeping kosher. There's just one statement there: you shall not eat milk and meat together. Well, actually, right? We said it doesn't even say that. It's only the calf's milk was his mother. So, okay, so there's like an entire tradition that we follow, which is not in the Bible.
Were the early rabbis aware of the pagan customs regarding, boiling a calf in its mother's milk?
Yeah, some of them, if you remember, we read Philo last time that we're aware of that, and brought that as a reasoning for why this is done. But they didn't always look for reasons for why it was done, because sometimes they said, this is God's commandment. And the famous Talmud passage is like, does God care if we cut the cow like this or cut the cow like this? Slaughter it like this or like this? Because God doesn't mind that. God commands, and we need to follow. That's sort of like the concept at the end of the day. And if, to be honest, like the laws of kashrut, some make sense, some don't make sense. It's like a package deal. The rabbis try to accept it all as a package deal of part of the belief in the God that commands and that you follow their rule. Okay, let's go on with the article here, although you all have very good questions there. So similarly, there are many meats. Oh no, we read that. So 319, the second paragraph. The kosher consumer who reads the list of ingredients on a product needs to know that some common ingredients such as wheat, sodium, caseinate, lactose, and casein are considered dairy. On the other hand, there are some additives with dairy-sounding names that are considered parve, including cream of tartar, lactic acid, and oleic acid. Other ingredients may not be kosher at all, but few consumers are well enough versed in food science to make sense of every term on the product label. To make life easier, there are kashrut supervision agencies throughout the world whose job is to endorse food products as kosher. Okay, so that's a very important concept that leads us into the next paragraph, which is kosher supervision. But with the important part of that paragraph was like, if we read a label and it said lactic acid, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's dairy, although the word lactic is in it. It's not. Why? And sometimes we read sodium caseinate, and that is dairy. So it's not just reading of the labels, which is basically what we're getting at. If you only read the label, you might be eating something that's dairy together with meat, and that's a biblical prohibition. Kosher supervision, bottom of 319.
So question,
Yeah.
if the label doesn't include all the information you need, which I think you just said sometimes, well, what can you do? You may be eating something that's not allowed.
It's turned to stone.
Yeah.
Well, First of all, you have to be somewhat versed in reading labels,
Mhm.
okay? So I do read labels, not everything that I buy as a kosher symbol, although I try, it makes my life easier. And especially in my house, I
Mhm.
try to really bring everything that has a kosher label. But we'll talk about that in a minute when we get to kosher supervision.
Yeah.
Rabbi, I have a
Um,
question, please. Can I
Yeah.
have a question?
huh?
Did you say that caffeine is dairy? Is it a dairy product? Caffeine?
Caffeine? No, I did not say that.
Tell
It sounded like
them
you said, okay, something. Sorry.
I don't
Thank
know.
you.
Okay, sure. Okay,
So Rabbi,
yeah,
so by law, every packaged food has to have all ingredients on the label. Unless they're grouped like natural flavorings and artificial flavorings like
yeah.
a group. But if it's anything else, it has to have it on the label.
Yeah, and other spices.
Yeah, those things are bad. They're bad.
They're very bad.
What's
Yeah.
that?
Like if it says natural flavorings, that can be
Yeah.
any pork, doesn't matter.
But
Yeah.
it's
Stay away
trace,
from it.
it's trace.
Pork flavor, yeah, those chips that
Yeah.
they.
They're
Right.
delicious.
Whatever, doesn't, even if it's like a lime drink, like these, what do they call them? LaCroix. And like lime flavored LaCroix with water and natural flavorings, you think that means lime juice? That can still be any animal or plant product.
okay, so
So,
we need to be careful.
They're
So
discouraging.
kosher supervision, let's read a little bit and then some of our questions will be answered here as well. Generally speaking, one should only consume processed foods prepared under the supervision of a rabbi or an accepted kashrut supervision agency. Special symbols called hechsherim or singular hechsher, usually pronounced by English speakers as hechsher, okay, with the accent of the first syllable, hechsher, unique to each agency appear on the labels of food products. Okay, so there are hundreds of such markings, some national, some local, some trusted by nearly all kosher consumers, and others not. Okay, so this whole, operation of keeping kosher is not organized by one party. It's a big market out there. It's a huge economical market, rolling billions of dollars every year. There's some kosher brands that are accepted by every rabbi and some that are like only accepted by some group. There's some locals also, okay? There's, so you have to know where you're going and who to trust. Consumers encountering unfamiliar hechsher symbols should check with the rabbi for advice as to the reliability of the symbol in question. Many of these symbols and the names and addresses of the agencies and institutions that use are listed conveniently on the website maintained by Arlene Massharf. Okay, so some products are marked with just the letter K by itself. Unlike the hechsher marks of supervising agencies, which are copyrighted and so may be used only with permission, that letter K, which cannot be copyrighted, generally indicates only the manufacturer's own assertion of the kashrut of the product. Okay, so there are many, many symbols of kashrut. This is the OU.
Yeah.
Very, very popular, and it stands for Orthodox Union.
Yeah,
Okay.
Orthodox rabbi.
Union of Orthodox Rabbis. It's a very big operation. They have a very good website. They tell you a lot of very good information. Okay. Then you have K, a triangle K. Okay. You have I don't know, RCA, which is like, I think it's Chicago
Oh,
rabbis, they give like there is a KSA. I think it's like Kansas.
Kansas City.
I think there's something there that they, or no, it's kosher, it's something,
Yeah.
different associations, okay? So there are different symbols, and then there's just K. The K is not a brand name. Okay, there's no copyright in it. If I put an OU in a product, I will be sued and I will lose all my assets, because they have lawyers that, that go after people all the time. And because they want to keep their reputation, they want to make sure that their standards of kashrut is always kept. And they send the mashgiach, we'll talk about that in a minute, to the supervisor. And mashgiach means the supervisor. They send him to the factory to actually look and see what's happening in the factory all the time. So a lot of times, if you have a certain high-end hashgacha supervision, that's because the supervisor, the mashgiach, is in the factory on a daily basis. That's his job. He gets paid to sit there and supervise what's going on. If it's a huge factory that has a lot of food products and stuff like that, he might go through, he might be working very hard to make sure, that he gets, he gets it right.
What symbols are used in, let's say, European countries?
They don't have these
No.
no. Sometimes they have OU, but just because if it's like comes from America. So in England, I was like, it might have changed, but I was like there 15, 20 years ago. And they just have a list of what's vegan. I mean, they have a list, like you go to the rabbi, you download like something, a list, these are the kosher foods. Or now they know if it's vegan, it's like completely okay. Because they're very strict on their vegan rules.
In the 30s and 40s, or 20s, 30s and 40s in New York, the very popular kosher brands were having battles between which rabbi would give the star.
LA had
give
this
them the
same
problem.
It was cultural wars.
It's yeah, I know, because again, there's a lot of money involved in this as well.
Yeah.
But do you really think, like, when you buy Coca-Cola and it says kosher for Passover, do you really think that the whole factory has like really turned over and Coca-Cola is kosher for Passover and it's different than
Yeah, specifically with Coke, there is an ingredient in it that is chametz that you cannot eat on Passover.
Really?
So they have a special line where they kosher it and they take out that ingredient and put like a substitute ingredient. I don't know nothing about it, but that's just all I heard.
Is that the
story?
In Israel, what's the labeling like?
In Israel, it's a very interesting question. In Israel, it is much more organized. There's the chief rabbinate of Israel has like a kosher department in it, and they give the kosher symbols around the country through each rabbi in its own city. Each rabbi has like, they could give, like they could go to factories and stuff like that, and they have like thousands of people that are going and checking these things. It provides jobs for a lot of people, and sometimes too much. Okay, every restaurant has a mashgiach, someone that they pay, and he comes in for a few hours, and people complain because sometimes he does nothing and he gets paid, for doing nothing.
Right.
It's blackmail.
What?
It's almost like blackmail.
Sometimes it's
Otherwise known as
blackmail,
a
yeah.
racket.
Yeah.
Our cousin was trying and.
Well, you don't have to take it,
Yeah.
but if you want
Yeah,
people
if
to
you-
come, yeah,
otherwise
if you want to
people
sell, yeah.
Our cousin was trying to organize, a reunion for her husband's, unit. And so she lets it out that she's gonna be doing this or whatever day. The phone calls start coming in, well, my rabbi, this, that, we'll get it from
Right.
this rabbi. And finally, she just said to this one person, You buy everything.
Yeah.
Buy everything. Don't bother
Yeah.
me.
I like that response.
Yeah, it becomes very problematic.
How does this
Isn't
work?
it?
Do you know how it works in the countries of South America, Mexico?
So they import a lot of things from America. Okay,
Mhm.
and every synagogue, at least the Orthodox one, has, like a small kosher shop or something like that you go and you buy frozen meats, never fresh. Milk sometimes. A lot of times they're out of that stuff, so it's much harder.
Mhm.
Like we don't realize how fortunate we are in America to
Mhm.
have this.
Is there any symbol for kosher for Pesach?
Yeah,
Yes.
let's,
Oh,
yeah,
is that further
Yes,
on?
I do.
yeah, that's further
Okay.
on. So some products, we read that. So sometimes, however, the K is used on a product that actually has been produced under rabbinic supervision, but which is sold without the hechsher, the certificate, because of a corporate policy. Manufacturers will usually respond with the name of their supervising rabbi or organizing if asked. Consumers should check with a rabbi for advice about the use of products marked with only a K. The question of the use of the letter K as kashrut symbol is discussed by Rabbi Kessel Abelson in response provided by the consumer movement. So some people say K is not enough because maybe a rabbi supervised, maybe not. Most of the times it did not, etc. Some rabbis hold that K means that someone went through the effort to check everything, and they didn't go and pay all the money maybe for a rabbi, or for what maybe they have other reasons, that they don't want to put like a certain hechsher on their brand name for whatever reason. And therefore we would trust that symbol, even though it's not a trademark, even though it's not endorsed by a certain kosher agency. And I think that we at Ner Tamid adopted a policy which I felt is okay to continue. That we would, anything that has like a kosher symbol would be permissible. Okay. I understood that kosher for Passover Coke was made with cane sugar rather than corn syrup. Not sure. Yeah, I think that's I think Naomi Savell is right. So that might be the issue.
I wonder anybody can earn a living if they have to be checking their food all the time.
What's the difference between kosher and kosher for Passover?
Kosher and kosher for Passover. Kosher for Passover means it was inspected that it doesn't have any chametz, any leaven, bread, no flour, no, nothing which constitutes that.
You have to clean it out.
I have orange juice that plainly said kosher for
hard.
Pesach, and I
Yeah.
was trying to think of, would it ever have chametz in it in the processing?
Right, but it could be that it went through, like machines that
Same
didn't, yeah, I know.
I have a solution. I have a solution and a business idea.
Yeah.
I think that no observant Jew should be allowed to go shopping without the presence of a rabbi.
Okay.
Well, that's a little too much.
It's a business idea.
Wait a minute, remember something, 2 Jews, 3 opinions.
Right.
I don't know, Chabad a few years ago, had a card table they set up at Passover, right near the Passover food. And anybody that came there, they had somebody sitting there offering advice.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Where was that? I didn't
What?
hear.
Chabad.
Oh.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
continue on page 320 in the middle. And there are a number of good reasons why kosher foods require formal rabbinic supervision during production. These include many food that might not, at first glance, seem to need it. One reason has to do with the equipment in which the product was prepared. Often the same cauldrons, pots, and baking equipment are used for producing something non-kosher, such as pork and beans, and then used for another product that might appear to be kosher, such as vegetarian beans. Okay, so that's one thing we need to be a little bit careful about. Is it clear?
No.
Campbell's pork and beans.
When the product is marked with a hechsher as kosher certification, however, the consumer can be certain that the ingredients and the equipment have been inspected and that the product is fully certifiable as kosher. Really, per using a list of ingredients can never provide the same level of certainty. Okay, so again, from the examples we gave, we could really, decide that we're having a dairy meal, and it turns out that if we don't use things that have kosher, we're having a dairy and meat meal together, and that is not permissible. In addition to their standard hechsher symbol, many kashrut supervision agencies affix the letter D or the word dairy to make explicit the non-parv status of the product. Okay, so sometimes you have OUD, and that would stand for dairy. So it's kosher, but it's dairy. If there's no so if I buy a dairy creamer, a non-dairy creamer, okay, and it has an OUD, it means that it's non-dairy, maybe in terms of the government eyes, but in terms of Jewish eyes, there's probably some kind of dairy stuff in it. You would have to read it to be really, really careful. There's some exceptions, and sometimes they say because it was like done with dairy equipment, not ingredients. Okay, so that's why they prohibit it. Conservative movement would not necessarily prohibit it. Okay, so that's also important to know. So, but if it's a non-dairy creamer and it's only OU, so then that would be parv. It does not say parv on it usually. Okay, sometimes things would say parv. Let's say if you buy a Caesar salad dressing, that's usually dairy. Okay, I got one the other day. It said OU and parv in it because that's something that you're not used to getting parv. You're used to getting it dairy. But now I could use that Caesar salad ranch. I'm sorry, I meant, I know Caesar, and ranch. Ranch dressing has the cheese in it.
Creamy.
Creamy, yeah. So if it says parv, you can use it in a dairy meal. Okay, so the same here.
You can use it in a meat mill.
Would say parv, etc.
Rabbi, so many food manufacturers processing do enormous amounts of cleaning of equipment. So how do we know, or how does anybody know whether, or even a supervisor, how do they know that equipment has been cleaned to make it?
They're there in the factory.
Yeah.
They give the instructions.
Are there standards that they, one thing to say it's at home and how you handle pots and pans, it's the whole other thing to talk about industrial production.
Yeah, so if you have a line of something and it's, we'll get to that as well soon. But if you have like, stainless steel, huge pots, okay, and you clean them in a certain way, which means usually like you wash them and you don't use them for more than 24 hours, like 25 hours, then they could be used for something else, okay? Each thing has its own category.
Imagine the schedule.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and, yeah.
Like in
Um,
our house.
a second,
Most places, industrial cleaning is.
a second reason for needing a hechsher has to do with governmental food and drug labeling laws. The laws and standards of government entities are based on civil laws guided by many different concerns, but not by Jewish law. A product reasonably considered non-dairy by the US Food and Drug Administration is noted may in fact be considered dairy by the standards of normative kashrut observance. A reference to natural flavor may sound innocuous, but the product may still be made from animal sources, as the book says, and Sandra as well. The willingness to go beyond the information on the label is a key part of keeping kosher. Okay, so that awareness that we talked about before, we don't just, take any food and eat it. We are trying to be aware of what we eat and how we consume foods. In addition to their standard hechsher symbol, many kashrut supervision agencies fix the letter D or the word dairy to make explicit the non-parv status of the product. This is what we just talked about before. Okay, what does that say?
Naturally flavors.
Oh,
Uh-oh,
okay.
sorry.
But it might have a kosher symbol on it.
Well, I'm gonna put my glasses on to,
Okay,
I'm concerned about him.
I'm nervous now.
yeah.
Very nervous.
It says, don't be trashy. Plastic bottle, you figure that out yourself. But I don't see.
I don't see any Ks.
I don't see anything. on
I'm sorry about this.
Here, show me.
Yes, sir.
You thought,
Apple?
you thought, but
Show me this.
there is, ignorance is okay.
No, I thought ignorance is bad. It's.
What is it here?
I don't know if they put any more,
God does not accept ignorance as an excuse. Yes.
they put any more labels.
I think you can't read
Here,
what you're
so this
buying.
has an OK, not an OU.
So am I,
Okay.
right? Am I safe?
So it's not just
Okay.
kosher, it's a certified kosher.
Ah.
The rabbi's been paid off, in other words.
Little faith.
Well,
Good job. Good job. Next time, bring me also one, but I take the dying one. Okay, just joking. Okay, so that's a very good, and it says natural flavor.
Yes, flavorings.
Yeah, so that's not animal natural flavor, right?
Well, an animal's natural. It's not a
I
chemical.
don't want to fight you.
No, but that then it would say meat on it.
Oh,
It'd have to be
right.
kosher animal. I doubt that they would.
Here's the cake.
Yeah,
Okay,
as I think we pointed out before. the
it's not just a
natural
K.
flavor.
It's not a K, it's an OK.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
It's okay.
Means it's okay.
This-
Well,
It's
yeah,
above, it's that little, and it's above a whole bunch of other stuff.
right, and I bought, you're trained to see these things after a while. I got these candies from Switzerland for my throat. How do you call them? The
Ricola.
Yeah.
And I'm like looking for like a whole hour, and then I got the guy from the supermarket. Is this kosher? He's like, oh, let's look together.
Yeah.
His name was like Ahmed something. We're both looking and looking, and and then finally I said, oh, I found it. He said, oh yeah. He says it just had a K on it.
Wow.
Okay, and because it's made in Switzerland, so there they don't, so I think they added that without, maybe they even had rabbis supervising it. But for me, that was like fine, that someone was like, trying.
Right.
Okay, so the letter P usually designates Passover. Okay? Because agencies typically add parv after their hechsher when appropriate. Now, this is very, very important, and I did not know that because I'm from Israel, and it took me a while to understand that I would look for parv food, and then it would say OU and P, and I would say, oh, that's wonderful. That means it's parv. Okay, so then they explained to me, no, it means Passover. Okay, it's kosher for Passover, which also starts with a P.
Yeah.
Okay, then I went back to Israel and I came back after, 15 years, so I forgot these rules. But I remember something with a P, okay? And then I went before, and then I came here for Passover, before Passover, so I went shopping and I said, oh, this is parv, okay? Not realizing that some of these things are meat products, okay? So you really need to understand what it is, but at the end of the day, it only means Passover. If it's parv, it would actually say, and I've
Parv.
seen that, okay? It would say like RCA, and then in very small letters, it would say the word parv. It would never say P. P is never used to symbolize parv, okay?
Rabbi, is
It always symbolizes Passover. Remember that for next year Passover.
is the P in Hebrew for par the same as for Pesach?
Yeah, it's with a pay.
Okay.
It'll be
Yeah.
pay.
Yeah.
So you can't tell.
Do they have these symbols in Israel with the English alphabet and? not
No.
Hebrew?
In Israel, these things, even if they're produced here, they get to Israel and they put their own labeling on. And someone cuts off a check as well. As well. Yeah. It's interesting to see the psychology of very religious Israelis that come here. And I try to explain that this is very orthodox, this is very strict, but it doesn't say in Hebrew kosher for them psychologically. It's like they don't trust that it's kosher. It takes them a while until they get hungry to.
Is that what happened to you?
Yeah, right, eventually you have to give in. Occasionally, meat or fish will appear after the hefter as well. Okay, so if you go at Ralph's here on Hawthorne, and there's a kosher section right across from where the hot dogs are.
Yeah.
Yeah, where the meat is, and you would see there's like a chicken broth and and meat broth, and look at that, and that would say meat on it as well. It would say kosher but meat. So that's interesting as well. In the latter case, as on products such as Worcestershire sauce, this is because there has been a custom not to eat fish with meat, as noted, even though fish is considered parv. However, since we do not enforce this custom, based as it is on the supposition that there was some physical danger inherent in eating fish and meat together, there's no reason not to use a substance that contains fish products like Worcestershire sauce together with meat. Okay, so that's it's an old custom that we do not go by anymore today, and we do consume, as we talked about last time, fish and meat together. Although in some communities, strict Ashkenazi communities, that's still avoided, but we don't go by that. Some products marked as parv might carry an additional designation such as DE or less commonly ME. This indicates that the product itself is parv, but was made on either dairy or meat equipment and had been cleaned but not restored to a pristine, not meat, non-dairy state through halachic procedures. Okay, so let's say I made something dairy, okay, and now I have a pot which is considered dairy, but I want to now make meat in that pot. Okay, if I make meat in that pot, it's not going to be kosher because I'm mixing like the meat in the milk, like the residue of the that goes into the pot, like would go back into the milk, into the meat, the residue of the milk. But if I wait 24 hours and then I clean the pot very well and I kosher it, okay? How do we kosher things? We're gonna study that next week, okay, or in 2 weeks from now.
Boiling water 7
Boil-
times, changing the
No,
water.
no, not 7 times. You boil the water,
Let it be hit.
okay, and you either have like a huge, another pot which is bigger, you boil the water and then you put the pot in it. You take it out and it's kosher, now you can use it for meat, it's like it's new, okay? Or if you don't have, if it's a big pot and you can't put it inside the bigger pot, so you boil the water in it and then you put soap in it and then you put a stone as well, and the stone overflows it and it all spills over, the hot water spills over, and that could also make it kosher. Okay, after you've waited.
Rabbi,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I had, on Shabbos, people eat gefilte fish, or some kind of fish, and then they change their fork and then they eat meat.
I know, some people do that, yeah. But that's a more strict custom. You don't have to do it.
You don't have to do what? What don't you have to do?
Change your fork.
You don't have to change your fork.
Well,
It's a
lot-
custom.
A lot of Pesach dinners, you have to filter fish and
Yeah.
you follow with a brisket or something.
I know, but some people have like different silverware for that.
That's right.
You have a fish for it.
Yeah. Well, maybe
Well,
that's,
when you're saying mixing, when you're eating meat fish and meat together, do you mean in one recipe or do you mean separately the way people do on shop? What do you mean by that?
same plate,
I think
yeah.
that's a deli.
Oh,
You're allowed to eat meat and fish in the same recipe. But there are a lot of
Okay.
Ashkenazim that prohibit that.
When you register, you sign up for fish.
Although you are allowed to. And again, it comes from that notion that there's like a physical danger in eating fish and meat together, which is in the Talmud. And we know today that medically that is not exact. There products with these designations as DE or ME, okay, meat, meat equipment or dairy equipment, okay? So there is products with these designations are considered carb and may be served after any meal or on either parv plates or on dishes appropriate for the meal being served. Okay, so you can serve it after the meal, but not inside the meal. There is a caveat regarding DE products. However, although they may be served at a meat meal, they should not be served at the same time as meat itself. Similarly, ME products, meat equipment products, should not be served at the same time as dairy products. For example, chocolate chip cookies marked as DE, okay, dairy equipment, may be served after a meat meal, but not together with the meat itself. Okay, so I have chocolate chip cookies. They are parv, but they were made with dairy equipment.
Mhm.
They can be served in a meat meal after dinner, not together with the meat.
Have to wait an hour.
No, you do not have to wait an hour at all. Okay? So the reason is because it was done in dairy equipment. None of the ingredients are dairy. If it would be dairy, then you would be eating milk and meat together. You cannot do that. Okay, is that clear? Good. To understand the rationale behind this concept, it is necessary to understand the distinction the halacha draws between products considered able to impart flavor directly from the flavor source, called noten ta'am, which is like implementing the taste. Noten is implementing, and ta'am is the taste. And those in which the flavor imparted is deemed to come from a flavored item, not from the original source of the flavor. Noten ta'am bar noten ta'am, which means implementing taste, the son of an implementing taste. Okay, so that's like a funny slogan, okay, because it's like the son of, and I'll explain in a minute what that means. But here's an example. Foods cooked in a pot, for example, are deemed to leave a taste of some sort in the pot. And the halacha holds that this taste can be passed along to the next item cooked in the pot. A third generation of taste can no longer needs to be taken into account, however. And products marked DE, dairy equipment, can therefore be considered par because the level of dairy absorbable by the final product, if any, is in the category of noten tam,
Have a problem.
bal noten tam. Okay, so if we have
Try not to.
Oh wow, it's like that situation here of just
You'll hear it.
I don't know why that wasn't okay.
They say I have a problem.
But if we have a pot here, okay, I do not know how to but here's a pot, okay? And I cooked meat in it. Okay, and now I'm gonna cook rice. Okay,
That's barf.
That's fine.
that's barf, that's okay. And now I wanna have this rice, I wanna eat this rice with a dairy on a dairy plate. Okay. What's happening? I cooked the rice in a meat pot. Okay. So it makes it meaty. Why? Because it imparts, it's okay, so it's problematic. However, the rule is if there was actual meat in here and I cooked the rice with the meat, okay, and now I separate the meat from the rice is still meat.
Right.
It cannot be eaten with a dairy meal. If, however, it's just the pot is empty and it's clean and it's been usually it's like 24 hours, then now, although this was a meat pot, the rice is parve and I can eat it with the dairy meal. So it's like a different distinction. If it was the cooked with it, then that's a problem. It makes that name on it. And the reason for all of this is what we called before, okay? Noten tam, which is like implementing the taste. So if I cook meat in this, okay, and then I put rice inside, it implements the taste of the meat into the rice. So that's like the rice itself is parve, right? The rice is parve, it's just rice. If I take out the rice now and I wash it very well, it's rice, okay? But it's meat rice already. Okay, it's got it. It's like it's forever, it's doomed. It can never be released out of that meat name of it. Okay. However, if I clean the pot, there's still meat residue that's been swallowed by the sides of the pot. Okay. You hear me on Zoom, right? Because I want to make sure. Yeah, actually with this owl, because I want to make sure it's recorded and that they hear me. So this rice now, okay, is going to be cooked so it's getting the meat flavor, but not in a direct way, in an indirect way. That's why it's the son of, it's a grandson, okay, of the it's like bar mitzvah, son of a child that gets to the mitzvah. So that rice is it was done with meat equipment, so that rice would be ME, meat equipment rice, but now it could be eaten with dairy. And now the rabbis say can I do this to begin with? Or do I have to, only in special circumstances? And there are different opinions of rabbis that say, no. If you did this deliberately to begin with, you cannot eat the rice with dairy. Other rabbis said, no, you could do this to begin with, okay? And we rule, especially in the conservative movement, that yes, you could do this to begin with. But if you have other pots that are clean and are parve, it's better to use them. Don't deliberately use that pot to begin with. So let's say you're cooking a big meal now, and you've used all your parve pots, and now a minute before Shabbat, you have to make rice in that, other pot that's meat-wise, okay? If that's your only option, you could do it, but don't do it to begin with.
The word tom, is that a Hebrew word?
Taste, yeah, it means
It's-
tom, it means taste.
Because in Yiddish and German, it's tom also.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
Yiddish.
yeah,
yeah.
that's what my mother would say, there's no top.
No,
Yeah.
tom, yeah.
Yeah. So that's
That
like,
was about
and it
anybody's
comes
word,
from
but
this halachic phrase of
Yeah,
it
that
has
kind
taste or
tom,
doesn't have
no
taste.
taste.
That is the hers.
Right, because the minute there's something cooked with
You
meat,
say when you
if,
didn't
let's say
like
I take a
food.
potato and I put it in a meat pot, that potato becomes meat, although it's parve.
Yeah, because
Okay.
it's touching.
It's touching, but even if I would take out that potato and now wash it very, very well, okay? It's like that's it. It's labeled as something that is meat. However, under some circumstances, you are able to eat it, and it's a little bit more complicated. I don't want to go into all of those things.
Okay.
Because it's also lunchtime, people might get hungry now.
Yeah.
But that was
My head is spinning.
that was for today.
All this stuff is really not based on health. Right?
Yeah,
Health
has
of the
nothing to
person.
do with health.
But wash your hands before you eat.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. But why go through all of this just to eat food?
Why do you eat kosher? Why
Yeah,
do
why do
people
you
eat
have to go
kosher?
through, why do you have all these rules on what you could eat, what you can't eat and stuff?
Oh, okay, so that's I refer you to lesson 1, go,
Yeah.
go read that one, okay? And the Rambam on keeping kosher, etc.
But does it explain why? Or he just says, this is what you need to do?
Well, that's some of the answers, is that this is what you need to do. And I also refer you to the beginning of the article, where Rabbi Paul Drazen writes very, very nicely about how
I'm gonna get another shot.
kashrut is among the most on page 306. Kashrut is among the most important institutions of the Jewish religion and constitutes nothing less than an attempt to turn the act of eating, surely among the most banal and ordinary of life's daily tasks, into a holy opportunity to acknowledge God as a source and sustainer of all life. Okay, so when we eat kosher, we say we are Jewish. We say that God, we try to be aware of God in our lives. We are trying to do something that is an ordinarily thing that we do every day, okay, a few times a day, that we bring an intention into it, that we are aware of what is permissible and not, and that we know that we have some limitations. We cannot consume everything that's here on earth whenever we want to, and whatever it's just like we say a blessing on things that we get, etc. And we sort of like submit ourselves to some kind of like a divine will of God that we are engaging with. And it's mysterious, and we don't always understand and know what we're doing it. Okay, that's one explanation.
Can I just give you a perspective from someone who's a scientist?
Yeah.
and a non-Jew. I think,
Uh-huh.
I think the difficulty comes when you try and make the distinction between, or try and enforce too rigidly the concept of science upon what is belief in God and faith. And I think if if you try and be scientific about every aspect of a belief, you'll drive yourself crazy. I think it's futile, they're two different things. This is about God. This is not about science.
Yeah, there's no scientific evidence that keeping kosher will keep you healthy, or or that there's any scientific reason for that.
But there is, and actually, when you think about it, there is actually a practical basis to it, but you can't get too deep into it. I
Right.
mean, there is a rationale.
Yeah, but,
Health rationale.
there
a lot
is,
of
yeah, I agree, there could be. Sometimes maybe in the past it used to be more healthy, maybe not, but that's probably not true either.
But
But in the
it can't be the
desert,
reason.
didn't people get sick if they cooked and,
Faith,
or they
Yeah,
ate in
that's
wooden
true.
bowls
Exactly.
that
Faith.
had
You have to accept
crevices
yeah.
in it, and they said if you
Maybe.
put meat in and then the milk soured the meat or.
I don't know,
No,
maybe.
Some things that make you sick, there, in pork, there's trichinosis that
They still can't
that
cure
that
that.
people could get, so that may not be the purpose, but I mean, there are some health
Yeah,
aspects.
It's a possibility. Okay, everyone, thank you very, very much. Good to be back, and we will continue next